From the founding generation until the early 1950s, those associated with libertarian thought were, for the most part, anti-interventionist, which meant both free markets at home and highly limited involvement overseas. This was the dominant position for libertarians from the founding generation all the way to Chodorov, Nock, Lane, and the others.
Chodorov and company are sometimes called the old right, which is misleading because libertarianism isn't right or left. But the term old is meaningful since it suggests replacement. Well, replaced by what?
In 1951, William F. Buckley Jr. arrived on the national scene with God and Man at Yale. In 1955, he founded National Review with James Burnham and Wilmore Kendall.
What gave Buckley and the conservatives the advantage over the libertarians was their connection to the national security state, which made no sense for a new movement supposedly advocating small government. There already was a small government movement, the libertarians. Why did they need to be replaced? Simple. They opposed the U.S. empire.
The context of the time is everything. The National Security Act of 1947 formed the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. The CIA is prohibited by law from spying on Americans. What is it doing today? Spying on Americans. In 1952, the National Security Agency, NSA, was supposedly formed to monitor foreign threats. What is it doing today? Collecting the phone calls, texts, and emails of all Americans. Buckley and company were clearly activists for the Truman National Security State, formed in the late 1940s to early 1950s.
Of the principal founders of National Review, Bill Buckley, James Burnham, Wilmore Kendall, and William Casey all worked for the OSS CIA. Buckley's sister Priscilla, who was managing editor of National Review, also worked for the CIA.
Buckley's most notorious writing was Why the South Must Prevail, National Review's defense of disenfranchising black voters to preserve segregation.
The central question is whether the white community in the South is entitled to prevail. The white community is so entitled because, for the time being, it is the advanced race.
Scarier than Buckley was James Burnham. Alleged admirers of Hitler are cliché, but not only did Burnham truly admire the Third Reich as its power grew, he admired Joseph Stalin as well. As he saw it, both leaders were decisive and efficient.
Stalin proves himself a great man in the grand style. The banquets, their enormous menus, all against the winter background of the starving multitudes, the dying millions at the front.
As if that weren't chilling enough, he then writes the most unbelievable line of all.
To starve by deliberate decision several millions is a type of action attributed ordinarily only to gods.
George Orwell was so appalled by Burnham that he wrote two warnings about him. The first, Second Thoughts on James Burnham. The second, one of the greatest novels ever, 1984. 1984 was Orwell saying, "This is where we're headed if the James Burnhams of the world get their way."
Again, the new movement, the conservatives, was infuriating. They would rope their audience in by singing the praises of small government. The next minute, they would completely contradict that by championing a giant, un-American military-industrial state.
Nowhere do you see this Orwellian doublespeak more than in the early Buckley. He starts off favorably quoting the libertarians Knox, Spencer, and Mencken, going through the usual conservative spiel praising small government. Then all of a sudden, he turns right on a dime and admits that he doesn't really believe any of it.
We have got to accept big government for the duration, a totalitarian bureaucracy within our shores. We must support large armies and air forces, and the attendant centralization of power in Washington, even with the Democrat Harry Truman at the reins of it all.